And the whole point of bringing a journal to her was to say, I wish you happiness.
No one ever imagined that a single whisper, barely louder than the hum of the desert wind, would ignite the downfall of an empire built on devotion, image, and denial. But that whisper became a roar of the kind that shatters illusions and drags every hidden sin into the light. When the secret tape surfaced, the Brown family's dynasty didn't just tremble. It erupted, collapsing in real time under the weight of greed, betrayal, and a truth too poisonous to ignore. The whisper began in the most ordinary ways-off gossip among tired crew members at the edge of a long filming day. For years, the Brown family had seemed untouchable. It's an odd mix of faith and fame that kept audiences watching, even when love turned to bitterness. But beneath the surface, resentment brewed like a hidden fire. Someone from the production team had seen too much. The manipulation behind the tears, the rehearsed affection, the financial control that tightened like a noose around everyone except Robyn. That someone pressed record. Not to destroy, but to prove what the cameras were never allowed to capture. What they caught instead would burn through every fragile tie holding the Browns together. When the audio leaked, it didn't crawl, it sprinted through the internet like wildfire across the Arizona plains. In the first few hours, no one believed it was real. The voice breathy, strained, but unmistakably, Robyn spoke with a calm terror that froze listeners. "It's just $820K, she said, her tone deliberate. "Kody doesn't need to know the exact amount. If it's filed under family expenses, nobody will question it. $820,000 spoken like pocket change, like a secret too casual to mean much. But that single sentence detonated everything. In minutes, hashtags trended, reaction videos exploded, and the word embezzlement began to cling to the Brown name like smoke. Inside a small rental in Arizona, Janelle stared at her laptop as the recording looped again and again. Gabe sat beside her, jaw tightening each time the familiar voice repeated those damning words. The second playback hurt worse than the first. "She did it," Janelle finally whispered, as if saying it out loud could make it less real. She really did it. Gabe opened the family's shared financial folders, ones he used to help manage on Froze. Numbers didn't lie. Transfers, hidden entries, account renames, all there. "Mom," he muttered, eyes wide. "This is stealing. This is outright lying." That's when Janelle's composure cracked. Years of compromise, of swallowing pride, of pretending fairness existed, gone in one breath. When she called Meri that night, her hand trembled, not from fear, but from rage. So controlled it frightened even her. "She stole the CP money," she said flatly. "Over $800,000. Silence echoed through the phone, broken only by the faint hum of Meri's Utah heater. "Why are you saying she forged Kody's signature?" Meri asked, disbelief giving way to dread. "Twice," Janelle replied. "Told him it was standard budgeting." Across the line, Meri's breath hitched. "She told him." Janelle answered bitterly, "No, she told us." Christine joined the call moments later, her video feed flickering under warm kitchen light. When she heard the clip, she didn't gasp or cry, just narrowed her eyes and said she always had a scheme. "But this is beyond anything." Her voice hardened. "We were chess pieces. But this move? It's her checkmate attempt." Meri's expression changed, sorrow sharpening into fury. "If she thinks she can pull this off," she said, "she's tampered with the wrong women." And in that instant, years of isolation dissolved. The ex-wives who once tiptoed around Kody's moods and Robyn's tears were suddenly united, not in nostalgia, but in purpose. The next morning, headlines began crawling across entertainment sites. Hidden audio leaks from Sister Wives set. Within hours, major outlets picked it up. Robyn Brown accused of secret transfers. By noon, #RobynGate trended on Twitter. Fans who once defended her now dissected every frame of past episodes, hunting for clues. The empire she built through quiet control was unraveling faster than she could refresh her feed. Yet, while the world screamed, the Brown family themselves fell into a suffocating silence. Kody didn't answer his phone. TLC issued a cautious statement. And somewhere in Flagstaff, Robyn sat alone, refreshing her screen, watching her reputation collapse in real time. When filming resumed days later, the tension was thick enough to taste. Robyn entered the set with her usual polished calm, clutching a folder like armor. Kody followed, grumbling about lighting, still oblivious to the storm overhead. The producers said little, only that they needed a reaction. Then one tapped a tablet. "We just want your response to this recording." Silence. Then, the voice again, Robyn's voice, echoing through the studio. "Kody doesn't need to know." She froze. Her face drained of color. Kody's eyes narrowed, his body stiff. When the clip ended, he turned toward her, his voice dangerously even. "You said you were just handling the finances." "I was," she stammered. "I had to make sure we were fine. My name," Kody cut in coldly, "was on those documents." His tone rose, cracking the mask of calm that had defined him for years. "You said it was for all of us." For a man who built a kingdom on loyalty, that moment was his first taste of betrayal. Cameras caught his hand shaking, his jaw tight. Robyn tried to steady her breath, but her words slipped out broken. "I thought if I kept it together, but there was no together left." Outside the studio, chaos erupted. Social media dissected every word. Forums filled with screenshots of tax records and property filings. Former fans became detectives. Within 24 hours, the narrative was clear. Robyn Brown had allegedly moved $820,000 of family money into accounts under her sole control. Not joint, not trust, not charitors. TLC suspended filming. The family's accounts were frozen. And for the first time, Robyn's carefully curated tears couldn't fix what her silence had caused. At home, Janelle's anger hardened into resolve. "This isn't miscommunication," she told Meri. "This is betrayal." Meri's reply was simple. "Then we treat it like one." What began as whispers in a quiet Arizona house had become a movement, a reckoning, years in the making. The Brown family's story, once sold as unity through faith, was now rewriting itself in real time. And at its center stood three women who had finally found their voices. And one woman whose secrets had cost her everything. When the courtroom doors opened that morning, it wasn't just about justice, it was about exposure. The truth, sharp and unfiltered, was finally walking into daylight. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but the sound of heels against the polished floor carried the same tension as a drum before execution. Every footstep of Meri, Janelle, and Christine echoed with the ghosts of a decade spent silenced, minimized, and gaslit under the banner of spiritual unity. But this was no longer about faith or family, was about reclaiming every stolen word, every manipulated dollar, and every ounce of dignity that had been quietly taken from them in the name of loyalty. Robyn entered last. Dressed in somber gray, her hair pulled tight as if discipline could disguise fear. She avoided every gaze. The woman who once commanded sympathy with trembling lips now carried an expression carved in stone. But even stone cracks under heat, and the air inside that courtroom burned with betrayal. Kody followed, face rigid, eyes shadowed. His jaw was clenched not with loyalty, but confusion, humiliation. The man who had built his entire identity around control was now the one being controlled by evidence. The judge's voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. "Mrs. Brown, are you aware of the financial discrepancies identified in the shared family accounts?" Robyn hesitated just long enough for every pen to pause. I handled the transfers as part of regular household budgeting." The room stiffened. Janelle's attorney rose, holding up a file thick with printed records. "Then perhaps you can explain," he said evenly, "why over $800,000 was rerouted through 3 shell accounts linked solely to your personal signature." A hush. Even the clicking of cameras from outside the door seemed to fade. Robyn's lips parted, but no sound came. Meri leaned forward, watching the woman who had once replaced her in Kody's eyes squirm beneath the weight of truth. "This wasn't budgeting," Christine whispered to Janelle. "It was laundering." As the attorney read each date aloud, each transaction, the courtroom became a mirror reflecting every deceit the audience had been blind to for years. Robyn's defense crumbled with each statement. This transfer, the attorney said, occurred 2 days after Ms. Janelle Brown's medical reimbursement request was denied. Where did the money go? No answer. This one, he continued, was the same week Mrs. Kody Brown filed for divorce. Why was $42,000 withdrawn under miscellaneous family aid? Silence. Robyn's hands trembled on the stand. I did it to keep us secure, she finally muttered, voice cracking. We were losing everything Kody's business, the land deals, the reputation. I just tried to fix it. The judge's expression didn't soften. By deception. From the back, Janelle's eyes filled with restrained fury. We trusted her, she whispered. Meri nodded slowly, bitterness coiling through her tone. She built safety out of our suffering. But the courtroom's real eruption came when the audio was played aloud officially for the record. The same whisper that had torn through the internet now echoed within the solemn walls of law. Kody doesn't need to know. Those 6 words landed like a verdict before the verdict. Kody's face turned pale. His hands, once folded in defiance, dropped to the table. For a moment, it wasn't the patriarch or the polygamist or the star. It was just a man watching the empire he'd built crumble in front of everyone. When the clip ended, the judge asked, Mr. Brown, were you aware of these transfers? Kody's voice was barely audible. No, Your Honor. Were you in agreement with your wife's handling of these funds? He swallowed hard. No, Your Honor, I was. Misled. Meri closed her eyes. For years, she had dreamed of hearing those words not because she wanted Kody broken, but because she wanted him honest. Yet the honesty came too late, buried beneath layers of betrayal and financial deceit. Outside, reporters swarmed, waiting for statements that would never come. Inside, Robyn's tears finally fell, but not from guilt. They were tears of exposure, of someone who realized that the sympathy she once weaponized had lost its magic. The courtroom no longer saw a victim. They saw a strategist cornered by her own moves. As the session recessed, Kody walked past Robyn without looking back. You wanted control, she murmured, low enough for only Robyn to hear. Now you can control the consequences. Robyn didn't reply. She couldn't. In the hallway, Meri paused before the exit, taking a deep breath. The cameras outside were waiting, but for the first time in years, she didn't feel the need to perform. We kept quiet for too long, she said softly to Janelle and Kody. Now the world gets to hear what silence cost us. And as they stepped out beneath the blinding flashes of press lights, it was clear the courtroom had only been the beginning. What waited beyond those doors wasn't just a sit, was reckoning. To sit was reckoning. The storm didn't wait for the verdict, it began the moment those courtroom doors swung open. In less than an hour, the Brown family's downfall wasn't just a legal matter. It was global entertainment. News tickers flashed across screens, podcasts lit up with emergency episodes, and hashtags flooded timelines like wildfire. Hashtag Robyn exposed. Hashtag Brown family scandal. Hashtag sister wives trial. The world that once adored their unique love story now dissected every lie, every transaction, every tear. Outside the courthouse, cameras swarmed like bees around honey gone sour. Robyn was escorted out under a black umbrella, her face hidden, her hands shaking. For years, she had played the fragile one, the one who just wanted peace. But peace had been purchased with stolen money, and now the receipt was public. One reporter shouted, Robyn, did you steal from your sister wives? Another yelled, Kody says you faked the fund transfers, care to comment? She didn't answer. Her silence was louder than any confession. Meanwhile, inside a small room 2 floors up, Kody, Janelle, and Meri sat together for the first time in months. No cameras, no producers, just truth. She thought she could buy silence, Kody said, voice steady, eyes sharp. But she forgot silence doesn't last forever. Janelle exhaled, exhausted but firm. Let her cry on camera now. We've cried off it for years. That night, the internet did what the court couldn't hit, delivered judgment faster than any jury. Clips of Robyn's stuttered testimony went viral on TikTok. Comment sections turned into public tribunals. Memes replaced sympathy. Every episode of Sister Wives that had once painted Robyn as the sweet victim was now rewatched with disgust. Every glance reinterpreted as manipulation. One viral post read, "The woman who cried on camera was also counting behind the scenes." It racked up 10 million views in 24 hours. Kody, for once, didn't know how to perform. He stayed off camera, holed up in what used to be his office, now stripped bare, a reflection of everything he'd lost. "They were supposed to stand by me," he muttered to himself, pacing like a man whose script had been rewritten mid-scene. But deep down, even he knew, this wasn't about loyalty anymore. It was about truth. The kind of truth you can't edit in post-production. Back at her home, Robyn sat in front of a blank phone screen, refreshing every few seconds. Notifications flooded in, some cruel, others pitying, most furious. Every name she had ever known now looked different in her inbox. She tried recording a video apology, her voice trembling, but each take collapsed into tears that no longer looked sincere. The world had seen her act before. This time, no one was buying the performance. Meanwhile, Meri did something unexpected. She opened her old diary, the one she'd hidden for years, and read aloud the words she had written the night Kody first brought Robyn into their lives. He said love expands. He said we'd be stronger. But he didn't say we'd be erased. She closed the journal and looked up at Christine and Janelle. Maybe it's time people see what expansion really cost. The next morning, they did exactly that. A joint interview, 3 women, 1 story. No producers, no scripts, just raw honesty. The studio was silent except for their voices. Christine spoke of the years she spent defending a marriage that no longer existed. Janelle talked about the hidden accounts, the promises of shared future homes that never materialized. And Meri finally broke the silence on the emotional manipulation that had been edited out for tone. "They said we were jealous," she said softly, "but all we wanted was fairness." When the interview aired, it broke records. Over 40 million views in 2 days. Headlines screamed, "The Sister Wives finally speak the truth." Even networks that once profited from their pain now couldn't look away from the reckoning. TLC released a statement hours later. Neutral, vague, defensive. But it didn't matter. The narrative had shifted. Robyn watched from her living room, the curtains drawn, the TV casting flickers of light across her pale face. She saw the women she once dismissed now commanding empathy from millions. She reached for the remote but didn't turn it off. She couldn't, because for the first time she saw what the world saw, the real story. Kody appeared briefly, a man aged by exposure. His statement was short, "I trusted the wrong people." But those words did nothing to repair his image. The audience didn't buy it. The women who had been dismissed as emotional were now the voices of reason. And Robyn, the one who claimed to hold the family together, was now the fracture everyone saw coming. By the end of the week, sponsorships pulled out. Production halted. The mansion they flaunted on TV went up for sale. The empire was gone, piece by piece, reputation by reputation. Yet for Meri, Christine, and Janelle, the destruction wasn't tragedy, was freedom. Standing together, they realized they didn't lose everything. They lost illusions. And sometimes, that's the only way to start again. As the sun set that night, Meri whispered what would become the closing line of every headline to follow. Empires built on secrets don't crumble. They collapse the moment someone tells the truth. The moment someone tells the truth. When the verdict was finally read, no one clapped, no one gasped, no one cried. The silence in that courtroom was heavier than any punishment could ever be. The judge's voice trembled with finality. Funds misappropriated. Restitution required. Case closed. But what echoed wasn't justice, it was the echo of everything lost. Robyn sat motionless, hands folded, eyes fixed on nothing. The world had watched her unravel. But this was the quiet collapse no camera could capture. Kody didn't look at her, not once. His stare remained locked on the polished wood of the bench, the same way he'd looked away from the truth for years. For the first time, the wives didn't look at him either. There was no anger left, only the hollow recognition that the man they'd fought for, shared and wept over, was already gone long before this trial began. When the gavel struck, it didn't sound like justice. It sounded like the closing of a chapter that had gone on too long. Robyn rose slowly, her face pale, lips trembling. But there were no tears left to give. Cameras waited outside, hungry for another image of collapse. But what stepped through those doors was not the villain the headlines described. It was a woman emptied of her own defenses. The fragile, trembling hands that once crafted stories of victimhood now hung limp. Uncertain of what they were supposed to hold when lies no longer worked. That night, the family homes, once full of laughter and chaos, stood silent. The lights that had burned for television were now dark. Christine packed her things without ceremony, folding memories into boxes that smelled of old tears and new freedom. Janelle sat in her kitchen, staring at an untouched cup of coffee. The sound of a clock ticking louder than any argument she'd ever had. And Meri, for the first time, didn't write in her journal. There was nothing left to say. Robyn stayed awake until dawn, the weight of the verdict pressing against her chest. The house was too quiet, too clean. Every surface reflected her face, every reflection someone she barely recognized. She reached for her phone, scrolling through old photos of smiling family moments that now looked staged, unfamiliar. There had been love once, hadn't there? Or maybe it was just hope, pretending to be love. She wondered which hurt more, the loss of their trust or the realization that she had been the architect of her own exile. Kody left before sunrise. No note, no goodbye. Just the sound of a door closing softly behind him. He didn't go home because there wasn't one anymore. The man who once ruled over for wives with certainty now wandered through hotel lobbies and back entrances. Avoiding reporters, avoiding mirrors, avoiding himself. He used to talk about destiny. Now, he couldn't finish a sentence without choking on regret. By the end of that week, the news cycle had moved on. Other scandals took the headlines. Other faces replaced theirs. But the silence that followed was the hardest to bear. There were no interviews, no offers, no scripts left to hide behind. The fame that had once seemed eternal evaporated, leaving only memory, and memory was merciless. Christine built a small life far away, somewhere quiet. She planted flowers in her backyard, but even beauty felt fragile now. Janelle started volunteering at a women's center, talking to others about financial freedom and self-worth. She didn't mention her story, but every woman who met her somehow recognized the weight she carried. And Meri finally burned the journal. The pages curled and blackened, the ink turning into smoke that rose into the cold evening air. Watching it disappear, she whispered to herself, "We loved too much in the wrong direction." Robyn stayed inside for months. The house began to decay the way guilt does, slowly, invisibly, until one day you noticed the cracks. Mail piled up, blinds stayed closed, the air grew stale. The empire she tried to protect had vanished, and in its place stood nothing but echoes. Sometimes she replayed the court recording, the moment her voice said, "Kody doesn't need to know." She'd pause right there, wondering what might have happened if she had chosen truth over control. But no answer ever came, only silence. When spring came, none of them reunited. No closure dinner, no apologies, no camera-ready forgiveness. The past was too heavy for reunion, too real for reality TV, yet somewhere in the quiet corners of their separate lives, each of them carried a small fragment of what was lost, not as pain, but as a warning. Love without honesty had built an empire, and honesty had been the one thing that destroyed it. As the sun set over the empty lots where their shared dreams once stood, the wind carried the faint sound of laughter, old, distant, remembered. And though no one could hear it now, it lingered like ghosts of what could have been. Because sometimes the worst punishment isn't losing everything, it's finally understanding why you did. Understanding why you did. Some endings don't explode. They dissolve quietly, like smoke fading from a fire long gone cold. As the courtroom lights dimmed and the cameras packed away, silence became the only truth left standing. Robyn sat alone in the hollow echo of what used to be her empire. No voices, no allies, no husband to shield her. The verdict had taken everything tangible, but it was the stillness afterward that stripped her bare. In the quiet, every word she'd spoken, every justification she'd clung to, returned to her like ghosts whispering through the walls. Kody, too, sat in his one-bedroom apartment staring at a photograph of what once passed for a family. The frame was cracked, the glass dust-streaked, but he couldn't bring himself to throw it away. Somewhere in that frozen image, they all still smiled, the illusion of unity that had cost them everything. Meri and Janelle didn't celebrate. They signed papers, answered reporters with restrained calm, and went home to empty kitchens where the hum of the refrigerator was louder than any applause. Justice, they learned, was a cold kind of comfort. It gave back the numbers, but not the years. It restored the balance sheet, not the trust. And Robyn, once the center of the story, once the tear-streaked symbol of loyalty and love, became a ghost in her own house. Her reflection in the dark window stared back at her with eyes she no longer recognized. She reached for her phone out of habit, then stopped. There was no one left to call. The Brown family didn't end in fire or fury. It ended in quiet rooms, in unanswered messages, in the sound of distant laughter that didn't belong to them anymore. Because sometimes the real punishment isn't losing what you had, it's realizing you were the reason it fell apart. It didn't end with shouting, it ended with silence. The kind of silence that settles after the truth has finally spoken, heavy, suffocating, impossible to escape. The courtroom was empty now, only the echo of footsteps fading down marble. Halls, each one marking the close of a chapter that should have never been written this way. Robyn stayed seated long after the gavel struck, fingers trembling over the edge of the witness table as though holding on. To the wood could keep her from slipping into the emptiness that followed. For years she had been the loyal one, the peacemaker, the patient wife, the symbol of unity. But loyalty built on fear always collapses, and patience used as a weapon always turns to ash. Her reflection in the polished courtroom glass caught her off guard. Mascara smudged, eyes hollow, mouth trembling not from grief but from recognition. For the first time she saw herself not as a victim, not as the misunderstood wife, but as the architect of her own ruin. Outside, the sky had turned that deep bruised shade between day and night. It's a kind of sky that doesn't know if it's holding on or letting go. Kody stood by the courthouse steps, his hands buried deep in his coat pockets, staring at the city lights flickering below. Once, he'd believed he was the center of something eternal, a family chosen by God, a man called to lead. But now, there was nothing left to lead. His wives had walked away, his children had stopped returning calls. And the faith that once gave him purpose now felt like